All right, 3, 2, 1, and we should be live. How's everybody doing today? I'm just loading into the edit mode right now. I'll switch our camera over in just a second. Looks like audio should be coming through. Sorry I don't have the normal microphone on, so it might sound a little different than usual, maybe a little echoey. I've only got about an hour, so I'm going to try and keep this brief and concise and tell you a little bit about where I'm heading, and also show you where we've been. So you've been potentially have seen the sorry, one second. That's the camera I want to switch to. Oh no, this one. There you go. Now you can see. Okay, so you've probably seen a little bit about this. We now have 5 maps since last time. We're working on a few more to get added today. Oh, look, there's even people there. The newest thing I added today was this gun that attaches to your hip, and there's only 1 per player, which is going to allow us to put like player stats and stuff on these things. So I'm really looking forward to that. In addition, we've also got it so you can now grab the gun, let go, grab gun, let go. I fixed some of the other bugs with like the eject not changing color. Anyway, lots of cool stuff going on there. I also added this like little thing here, and this is what I really want to talk about today, which is player settings. So if you haven't seen this in play mode, it's kind of baffling at first glance. So the first thing you can do is turn auto respawn on or off. So this is whether or not you get spawned into the game or not. I like to just keep playing, so I leave it on. The respawn fade means you can turn off that fade to black that happens while you're in the game, so you can turn that off or on. So same thing as before, you get the little arrow to the left telling you you've selected that. And then on the bottom one, I've got this to teleport me back to the spawn zone. And if I go back in here, I can actually select, oh, wrong one, go back down to YB. And so you can change what your YB button does on the gun. And so if I change it to eject clip, I can now eject the clip. And if I select reload, I can now reload. And if I use my other eject, I can now quickly eject and reload the gun. But I prefer to keep it on respawn. So anyway, player settings, pretty cool. Curious to see how we did that. I'm going to show you in build mode first, and then I want to talk about the biggest problem maybe before we even get into that, which is right now, loads of players want to change this at the same time, but there's only one place to change it, which is okay if everybody knew about it and people were just coming in on occasion to adjust it. But because everybody needs access to that, what I wanted to look at today was how we can give every player one of these without costing 4 triggers, 3 text objects, whatever else there is here, right? So like we could have multiple, but point is, need a better method. And so what I'd like to do, and I think I have to go to an empty world to test this, is I want to build a kind of like a heads up display sort of thing where there's a little drop down arrow here. And when you click on it, it drops down these same player settings. And then the player can gesture like swiping to the left to change the setting and swiping down to select different settings. And then you tap it again to hide the menu. Okay, sounds pretty crazy. We're definitely not going to get all of that today. Just full disclosure, I've got an appointment at the chiropractor in an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to go and show you as much as we can. And the first thing I want to show you was how this board was made. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the world. Also, if you haven't seen this yet, and this is your first time seeing Horizon Royale, there are a bunch of tiles. I think it's a 16 by 16 grid or so. You get a custom edge, a custom logo, a custom spawn zone, and then there's 10 large tiles, 10 small tiles, and it selects them at random, which then are placed at random here on the grid. And so when we stop the world, you'll see there's actually nothing in the world. It's just a bunch of assets spawning. And so there is a bug that occurs after about an hour. It should be fixed in 2 weeks. We're working with Meta to get that fixed for everybody. But as you can see, there's actually nothing in this world. So there you go. The world's really not much to it, which is kind of fun. We're going to be releasing a template in about 3 to 4 weeks so that you can make your own maps. We're currently working on the template. I just finished building it myself. Here's the templates I've been working on. So like the guide for the logo, you can see this is what it looks like. And then you can customize this and you could, but it still says Horizon Royale, right? Like, so it's got to stay the same, but you could like add some detail to the edges or change the coloring. And then it's got to stay within this bounding box for the asset to spawn correctly. And the spawn zone is very similar, except for it's got a lot more guides in it. And you can see it's got this infinity stretching thing that happens, which makes it weird to pull out. But inside, you can see we've added all these guides with like barriers. You can see where the doors are. So barrier meaning that's a wall you can't walk through. There's recommended viewing area. You got the spawn in zone, the stats walls, and everything that people need to know where things are when they're building this. So it's a pretty cool thing. But like I said, we're still working on it. It's definitely early days, especially since we haven't fully worked out the setup inside of here. So lots of work to do on that end. Okay. So next thing I want to go ahead and show you was the scripting that's happening here. So the first thing I'll show you is we've got a very simple script called play haptics. This runs on each of these 4 triggers. So you got the left trigger, the right trigger, the up trigger, and the down trigger, and they all correspond to these arrows. We added the text because people didn't know to touch the arrows, but now that there's text there, it's a lot easier to understand how this works. And the triggers themselves are simply running this script, and they only do one thing, which is to play haptics and a sound effect. So when world is started, it sets its position, origin position to be the position of self. When trigger is entered by player, we're playing that sound effect. That's actually in the center, so we're not even moving the sound effect because it's right there in the center, so we didn't feel like we needed to do that. We then set self-detection to false, so we immediately turn it off so that it's not being hit twice. And then if distance from player's right hand is less than their left hand, so basically we're checking the distance between their right hand to self and their left hand to self. And if the right hand is closer to the button, we play haptics on the right hand. Otherwise, we play it on the left hand. And so we use the distance to, which is found under your operators under vector math. And then you can grab the distance from one position to the other using that distance to. And then after a delay, we re-enable the trigger so you can press it again. In fact, we've been having an issue with people pressing it too quickly. So I'm going to change this to 1 second. I want people to do a click, 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 but there was this one guy who put his hand in and then he didn't pull it out till a second later. And he was like, couldn't get the button to click. So 1 second should be better for that purpose. Okay. Next up, player settings. But it's also kind of nice to be able to leave your hand in there and cycle through them pretty quickly. So in player settings, this is running on this text object. It's a display. It's just basically constantly updating and displaying based off of a bunch of information, but you'll see that we have lots of triggers to pay attention to. So over here under variables, we have started with a bunch of text, which I'll go through when we get to the text part of this, but we've got a player trigger. That is this giant green trigger that lets us know when a player is standing in this position. And then we have a list of all the players in the trigger. So we count every player that enters the trigger. And then we want to know who the current player ID is. And we usually use the item 0 from this list, but it's also nice to have it in here, probably for some other things we do in the script. And then we've got a list of settings. So here you can see all the settings available to the YB controller. So we've listed those out here. We also have another list of settings found down here, which is all the settings that are available: auto respawn, respawn fade, YB button. And so these lists we can then cycle through. They're not necessary, but it is nice to have them. I settings is just a list that we're copying a list into to use as an iterator when we're doing the setup. And then we've got the objects for each of those buttons. So the up, down, left, and right button. And you'll see that the first thing we do is we connect these events. So the trigger enter is connected to new player entering. We connect the trigger exit to player left. We connect the up, down, left, and right to their respective arrow events. And then we send player left to self with server player on world start to update the text display. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where we can see some of these events coming in. And you can see we've got right arrow being received with a player ID. It's important to click the new parameter and create a player variable. I call them PLID, although the name of them isn't super important. So you could call it ID or P or player for that matter. And but make sure it does not match any variable name that you already have. Otherwise, it will cause an error. So anyway, you create a parameter so that the event is received, because this is a trigger enter event, which means it is received with a player variable. So we need that to come to get the event. And you'll see then we have left arrow, down arrow, and up arrow. And then we also have above this, we should have when new player is received and when player left is received. So following the chronological order, we'll see that send player left starts on world start. So we'll run down to player left. And when player left is received, did I go too far? I did. When the player left event is received with a player ID, you'll remember on the world start, we're sending it with server player, and the server player is just a value found over here so that you can pretend there's a player entering. We then say if player and trigger contains the player ID, remove the player from the list because they have left the trigger. And then if the length of the players in trigger is equal to 0, we are going to set it up to be empty. This is the null value. And so because this is a server player, they're not in the list. They don't try to remove them, but there's still no one in the list because the world has just started, so no one's actually entered this trigger. We are going to set player name to be null. We're going to set auto respond to this text value that says on off to kind of display those are the options. We say YB is respond eject, and we set highlight to 0. And so we're not highlighting anything, or if we were, it would be item 0. And we set current player ID to server player. We then send update display to self. Now, it is important to note that if we did have a player left in this list, we would send a new player to self with item 0 from the list, so that way we can display the new player. But instead, we're going to go and follow this again chronologically. So we're sending update display to self, which says if current player ID is not equal to a server player, we then update those stats that we just updated in the previous event. So the player name would get set if there was an active player, as well as all the stats that the player has saved, which we use player variables for. So you can see we're getting player persistent variables. And so under your this section, you can go to player variables, and you can see that we have saved all of these player variables in here. So like no fade, YB, and some other ones. So each setting has a player variable, so that saves between sessions. And it's just a little easier to use than the other alternatives. So then after we're done with that, we're setting iSettings to settings. So remember, we want this to be a copy of settings so that we can remove items from this list without affecting the master copy of settings. So then we say if the player does not equal null, so the player is not null, we are then going to get the highlight value and set that in iSettings. And so what we're doing is we're adding the bold value and the bold off value. And we're also adding this little arrow tick to make it look like that's the one that's selected. But since the item is null, we are not going to do this. The next part of this is we're just setting up a giant set of display. And so we set display me to be font plus the title plus the player name. These are all those values you saw in here. So rather than having to type out a bunch of text here, which can sometimes break our script, I like to type it out as string variables. And so you can see we have our font set to electronic highway sign SDF. We also have our title set here. And so then we can just go ahead and plug those values into here with a bunch of plus symbols. So the font plus the title plus the player name, which we know is null. We then get the display me again. And so we're updating display me. So we've just update it here, then we set it again, but we add to it. So we put display me in the first line so that we can continue adding to the back end of it. So then we add a break, another break, and another break. So there's 3 breaks in here, which creates a nice big gap between the title and our next settings line. And then we go and add to display me again, and we get item 0 from the iSettings list. And we add to that with the auto respawn variable, which you'll remember we set to be on off. But if this had been a player, it would have been set to on or off. And then we go and do that again with some more breaks, and we do that again for the next setting and the next setting until we get to the end where we set display me to be displayed on self. Okay, so that's more or less how that works. These arrows are going to slowly move through the values. So highlight gets set +1 when you move the up arrow or down arrow. You're going to be changing that value. We use the modulus length of settings to make sure that it stays within the index of what is available in settings. So if you've never used modulus before, the way this works is you're setting highlight to be +1, and then you say if it equals the length of settings, set it back to 0. That's what modulus is doing. So you say there's 3 items in the list. It starts at 0, we then go to 1, then we go to 2. When it goes to 3, it's set back to 0. And then say you wanted to use modulus with something more than +1, like +8. 0 + 8 modulus 3 is what the length of settings is, would then return 2 because 8 divided by 3 has a remainder of 2. And that's what modulus does. It returns the remainder. We then send update display to self, which is going to just keep updating that display. So this whole thing that we just walked through, that's what it's doing, right? So every time we use the arrow buttons, we then update the display. And so our left and right arrows are the complicated ones because they have to check which highlight are we on. And if we're in that highlight, what do we do? So right in this case, we set auto respawn to be +1. Similarly, we're doing a modulus to make sure it stays within a 0 and 1 value. Same thing is true for our no fade, which is also a 0 or 1 value. And so we're just setting the player variable and getting the player variable and adding 1 mod 2. And then for our YB, this one's a little bit different because there's actually 3 values. And so in this case, since this is a subtraction event, the left arrow is a minus. What we do is we take the length of YB settings, we subtract 1 and then add that, and then modulus it. And if that doesn't make sense, that's okay. So let me just try to walk through. So imagine you have 3 settings, which we do, and then you want to go back 1, but you can't mod 0 or mod -1. So you can't just subtract 1, mod 3. So you have to go the other direction. And since modulus is this kind of looping event, we can then think about it as being adding the entire amount -1. So say you're at 1 and you want to go to 0. Well, 3 minus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 mod 3 is 0. So that's how you go backwards by going forwards using the modulus. It's a little complicated, but listen to that 2 or 3 times and hopefully that'll click in. But it definitely took me a minute to learn, and now it saves me a lot of time because it's a lot easier than putting in a bunch of if statements for when it equals 3. Okay, so then the right arrow is going to do the exact same thing, except for it doesn't have the super complicated mod. It just does YB plus 1 modulus length, and everything else is the same. So that is how we set up this player settings board. Now, with a little bit of time left, 2:27, I've probably got 45 minutes. I'd love to try and create a better version of this. And so you'll notice I have locked everything in here. I really just need the scripts part of this. I don't even know if I need the haptics, but I'm going to quickly create an asset, and I'm going to go to an empty world. As much as I'll tell you that in a second. Okay, so we're going to save this as player settings. Player settings. Okay. I don't know how much of this I'm actually going to use, but I just want to keep a copy in case I need it and save to. Oh, I hate when that happens. I really wish they would fix that when you like click and then it undoes what you're doing. You're like trying to create a new asset. So they recommend doing it this way, which is it's like, well, just fix the problem, please. Like, don't just tell me to do it a different way. Anyway, small little things that get you. So anyway, trying to do it this new button as much as I don't like it. New asset called P settings. Okay. And create. Okay. There is our player settings asset. So then I'm going to go ahead and go to a empty world. Also, if you're just joining us, welcome. I'd love to quickly show you what this looks like so you can see what we're working on, because this world is super duper cool. And all I did is hit play world, and when the world starts, it starts loading in the next map. So you'll see it's pretty empty right now. And then in a moment, it's going to load in the logo, the spawn zone, the arena, which is the edge of this. This is the Mayan template. And so the Mayan template comes with some sound effects like the crickets you're hearing. It comes with some sounds for the fire. We also have some flames in here, as well as the water for the waterfall. And then there's 10 large tiles and 10 small tiles. They then get randomly placed across the map. And it's just a changing PvP arena. Currently we have 5 in play, so go check out Horizon Royale right now. You can try this out for yourself. And we're working on getting more maps in, and eventually we're going to invite the general public like yourself to create maps and submit them to be included in the lineup. We just have a little bit more work to do on that. So about 3 to 4 weeks we are estimating before we're available to take public applications. All right, so next up, we're going to a new world. Create. New blank world called... I just want to call this like HUD menu. Okay. I'm really not confident in the success of this, and I feel like we're going to have to do a couple publishing of the world just to see if it works. But I'm excited. So, while we're traveling, to recap anybody who didn't hear the first part of this, the problem with that player menu settings that you just saw is that people want to go up to it multiple at a time and they don't queue very well. Apparently we're not very European. Just kidding. But queuing wasn't really working. People were clicking the buttons multiple at a time. It wasn't easy to tell what your settings were. And I wanted to create this on a per player basis. And so the idea here is that we're going to create an object. And since I want this to take up the least amount of complexity as possible, we're going to use a text object that's locally scripted. Yowza, this is going to be crazy. So text object, and the basis of this text object is that there is a caret key. Let me find the caret key. There. Oh, I want it upside down though. So can I do that? Rotate. So sometimes what I like to do is type stuff out before scripting it just to see if it works. So if I type like 180 and then I put in the caret key or close bracket, and then put in the caret key and then turn rotate off. So slash rotate to stop it. And then type in something like a space bar and then hello world just to see how it kind of lines up. Also, I've got this weird bug right now that hasn't plagued me before, but I'm not really getting any haptic feedback on my controller, so apologies for some of that weird typing. Okay, so what we can see has happened is the caret key is flipped the way I wanted it, but it's embedded in the H, which would be cool if that's what I wanted it to do, but I know that I would put this on another line, so I'm going to add a break in here and see, there we go. And so the other thing that I would want to do would be align left. So we'll go and, come on, select. Align equals left. And perfect. Okay, so this is the idea. That's the basis of this. So now that we know what we have for text, let's go ahead and create a script. We'll type this up. And so what I'm imagining is as a player, I'm going to see this in my top left of my screen, and then I'm going to tap it. And then that's going to bring down a whole set of menu items that I can then engage with. Okay, so the script section of this is we need the basis. So we're going to call this the string, the caret, and then put that there. Oh, it doesn't even like special characters. Whatever, we'll call it the caret. So the caret is going to be align equals, and come on, align equals left, and then we're going to do rotate equals 180, and then we're going to do the caret symbol, and then we turn rotate off. Rotate, need it to say slash rotate actually. There we go, and slash rotate. And then the last step is to add a break. And now we're on a separate line, and that should be the basis for all of our starting points. So we're going to call this HUD. And the reason I'm not calling it like player settings HUD is because I actually have like a potentially grander plan. Like if I can pull this off in a really good way that feels good and people like this, what I want to do then is make it so that you could also like swap your weapons out with this. You could vote for the next map. You could get like pop-ups that say like mute player. I don't know if I actually want to do that, but there's options that we could be thinking about for the future for this heads-up display. So we're going to start really basic, and then once we get the basics working, we can consider much more complicated things in the future. Now, like I said, I want to save as much capacity as possible. Attaching an object to a player, totally viable, but it takes up 1/4% of simulation animation, whereas a text object takes up 1/16, which means for 1%, I can write code to do what attaching to a player does. And for the opposite option would be 4% capacity cost, right? So this seems to make sense to me. Yeah. The other option would take 4 times as much capacity. This is, I don't know, it's a debate for me because then I don't have to write the code for attaching it to the player. I just have to position it, which is also something I'm considering. I'll keep thinking about it. Okay. So for now, let's go and start by displaying this text on the self. So display text on self. There we go. When world is started. And then we need to attach this script to here. So I'll go attach HUD, and fantastic. So that has worked well. And then we also want to turn down autofit. So autofit will be off. We're going to set this to be 2, which is really small, but that's kind of the idea of this. And then the next thing I want to do is create, this is bonkers that I'm creating this as part of this really quick tutorial, but quick tutorial. This guy's crazy. So I'm going to grab a spawn point. These are my favorite new like managers, mostly because they look like people, which is kind of fun. You just have to make sure to turn off spawn on start so that they're not actually being used. And then what we can do with this, and sometimes I'll actually even like snap the script to the center point so it even looks better. is we're going to create what I call an assigner. Sorry, Ko. I can't talk right now. So this assigner is going to assign a player index to every single heads-up display. And so my favorite way to do that is when you start with a when event is received, it's received with a parameter. Sorry, let me slow down. If he knows. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do on our assigner is create a list of objects. So we go to the dropdown and select object, click list, and call this HUDs. And so I make sure to add the S because there's multiple of them. And if I use HUD somewhere else, we're in trouble. So then we can go to our new parameter and select object from the new parameter on our event. And this object is a heads up display. So I will call this one HUD. Just note that having an S makes this so there's no bugs. So then this event that's going to be received, I call add me. And because we're adding it to a list. So add me and confirm. So now when the add me event is received with a heads up display, what we want to do is grab an if statement. We're going to grab a not, and you'll see why that's important in a second. We then scroll down to the bottom, grab list contains item, and then scroll up and grab add to list. Grab add to list. And so what we're doing here when this add me event is received is we say if this HUD object is not in the list, the list HUDs, we then want to add the HUD to the HUDs list. And that is how we get all of these events, all of these objects added. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I'll use this add me event to also find out the index of the HUD in the list. And so you can send this thing multiple times and it won't get added to the list because we've added this not in list when we add. And instead, we can just send an event to the HUD. So we send event to the HUD. And this event is UR4. And so I call this UR4. And it's going to tell the HUD who they are for, what player ID they are for. And the value that goes in the new parameter slot is under our operators tab, the index of the HUD in the HUDs list. And so this tells it where it's at in the list. And so you can imagine if we had 16 of these, each one gets its own place in the list, between 0 and 15 being the highest. And so that returning that value tells it you are for that player. And so that's how we quickly assign these heads-up displays a player. Now, to make this work correctly, we need to go into our heads-up display and add corresponding events. So we'll go grab the send event to object. We're going to send the add me event with self as a parameter. We need to create an object variable, which we call assigner, since that's what it's doing. Assigner, and click confirm. And so we send add me to the assigner with self as a parameter, which we know will cause an event to come back. And that event is the UR4 event. So that's right here at the bottom. And that's received with the number parameter, my plid. Yeah, that's fine. My plid confirm. And I don't know if I like that. My plid I. Let's delete that. Try again. Better name is my plid index, because that's the index of my player ID. Confirm. And so then we can save a new number variable called I am for. And I love how 4 isn't 4, but it's 4. If that makes sense. So then we're going to set I am for to the my player ID index. So now we have saved this value, which allows us to do one really cool thing. And this is all happening within like 1 second, if not less, of the world starting. So this has all happened before any players have arrived, which is the good news. Theoretically. We'll find out when we publish the world, I suppose. But then when the player enters the world, we now want to check I am for. Now, just in case, for some reason, this is at -1. -1 means out of index. So what I've done by going to the variables tab and typing in -1 to I am for, this means I'm out of index. This is not good. it doesn't have a value assigned to it. The value that IM4 can be will always be between 0 and 15, since our world is for 16 players, and there will be 16 of these objects. And so when the world is entered by a player, if it equals -1, we have a problem. And so what we can do is say if the index does equal -1, I love how I'm fixing bugs while we go. It's great. We can say if the IM4 does equal -1, honestly, this is really how you keep your scripts running smooth, even like months into the future when things potentially change or run faster or different. It's like you think about these worst case scenarios and you actually address them even if they aren't happening. So what we do is say if it's out of index, it hasn't received its index yet, we know that should happen within 1 second. So we send an event with a delay to self. And unfortunately, I keep grabbing these items from up here when I go over to here, which is kind of infuriating. There we go. So, and I wanted it with a delay. Sorry, 1 second. Send event with delay. There we go. So if this is true, we send the event player enters world. So world player enter is sent to self after a 1 second delay with the player that entered the world. What this will do is make sure that this event happens eventually. So if, say for instance, this event took 10 or 20 seconds to occur for some random reason, this would loop 10 times until this number is set. So that allows us to go in here and add an else. And so we know that it's very unlikely this will happen. So what will happen is the else statement. And in the else statement, we put all the things that we want to happen when world is entered by player, which is that we want to know that player and save them forever. So we go to player ID and say myplid. This is why I renamed that item earlier. This is where we're going to use that myplid as a variable. So then we can grab our set2 from the values tab and set myplid to be this player. Okay, now we've saved our player. We now know who we are for. And the next thing I think we should do is create a really simple on update loop to move this around. Now, normally I would make this a local script, and at some point we should do that. I'm just a little concerned because this we'll get to that. I'm gonna hold off on that for 1 second, and then we'll go the easy route. Because normally when you do local scripts, you have to stack it with a non-local script to be able to save any information like this. So you'd have like a HUD manager, then you have the HUD object. It's a mess. I don't like doing it. If you're interested in knowing how to do that in detail, I encourage you to go to the main channel where we do a video. I believe it is called Heads Up Display. And it's like a year old, but the concept is still the same, and everything on there still works. It's just how you use local scripting is very complicated. So, okie doke. Now, this is set up. We want to then also do this the easy way. So we're going to create a new variable over here, which is going to be the text object. So we're going to call this object text, and say my text will be the name of this. There we go, and confirm. And then on world start, where we were setting our my text, we were doing it on self. We're actually now going to do this on my text. And what we're going to do is remove the script from our little caret key here, which I now realize I could have made a, why did it not let me select that? Let's stop the world. Oh, because it's saving. When it's saving, sometimes you can't select things. Okay. So I could have made that like a really tiny V, but that's okay. Oh yeah, since I'm using left justification, sometimes the bounding box is in a really weird place. And of course it doesn't like do very good. Anyway, we're going to actually remove the script from this. And I'm going to show you the easy way to set this up, which is to create a cube. Do we want to use a cube? No, we want to save capacity. Every little bit counts. So instead we're going to use the sound recorder gizmo. And this is going to be the attachable center. Don't record any sound into it, otherwise it does take up capacity, otherwise it doesn't. It takes up one object of capacity, but it doesn't take up any simulation or geometric or any sound complexity, which is why I use this. There's lots of objects you could use that do the same thing, but this is my favorite. Okay, so I'm positioning this relative to where I imagine the player's torso or head being, I guess. So the head would be maybe roughly right there. And so then we're going to select and select, and then group. And of course, this is way off over here. We're going to really have to adjust these settings to get this to work right, but that's okay. So then what we want to do is make this animated. We're not going to make it interactive. We should still be able to go over here and make it avatar attachable anchor. We want to move this out from the player's face, and that is this one. So we go out by 0.5. We want to go over to the left, which is negative 0.15 roughly. And we want to go out or up maybe. So maybe up by 0.1. These are really just guess and check and then try again. So sometimes you need a person here to help you. And now that we've got this set up for our grouped object, we can now attach the heads-up display script, and we can then zoom in and open the properties panel of our text object. Oh, it was already open, so we'll then drag that into the My Text. We can then zoom out and go up to our assigner control object here, and then drag that into our assigner. Now, to make this much easier to read all over the place, we're going to name this assigner. There we go. And so now when I reopen this group, it'll say assigner down here. So it's attached to the assigner. And then the text is fine. So that way it doesn't say spawn point. You'd be like, why is the assigner a spawn point? It could confuse you later. It's definitely happened to me. So just nice to name things. Okay, so with all of this set up, we then need to attach it to the player. So we're going to go into our heads up display, and when the player enters the world right here, this is where we want to attach it to that player. So actions, top of actions, you'll see attach to player, attach attachable object to player. Drop that into here, and we're going to attach this to the player. We're attaching it to the head. The object we're attaching is self, which we can find under the values tab, and drag that over into here. And if we're lucky, that'll work. So wish me luck. Script, clear, play, and walk into the world. Okay, there's that object. It's not attached to my head for some reason. Let's go see if we got a bug on our script. We do not. So why did that not actually attach? So we'll go into here. IM4 should have equaled 0. I'm the only person here, so I should be 0. And adme is connected to the signer. It could be that one of the variables didn't connect in correctly. Let's check. They are all incorrect. I did maybe have to go to interactive then. I thought animated would be fine, but maybe I do need to go to interactive. Let's make sure that this event is being received and that it's firing the attached self to player's head. So we'll go into our values tab to grab a debug print, and we're just going to debug print the name of the player. And that's just one of my favorite things to debug print. It's easy, and there we have it. So script expression cannot be empty. Oh yeah, I hate those new bugs or those new like warnings. Like I don't need to have that warning. I appreciate it, but I see it in the script panel. Okay, so interestingly, we didn't get an event here in our console, which is peculiar, isn't it? So I would guess that it is running this IM4 -1 over and over again because we didn't receive the UR4 with a player ID index. So send adme to the assigner with self, and we go to the assigner script. Double check that that's set up correctly. When adme is received with the heads up display, if it's not in the list, add it to the list. Send UR4 to the heads up display with the index of HUD and HUDs. This all makes sense, but we should just debug print here real quick. Debug print the index of the heads up display when that comes through. And so we're just kind of stepping back through one step at a time to see where is this breaking. So now I've come into the world, and when I go into build mode, I should have saw something. Did I forget to attach the script to this? I did. I named it, but I forgot to attach the script. Ah, silly me. Okay, so now when I hit play, it should all work. Here we go. All right, so it is attached to me because it's no longer over there. We can also open up our thing here and see it somewhere. Should be somewhere around me. I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Look at that. There it is. Way, way, way up there. Okay, I better take this call. One moment. Hey, KO, I'm on stream. You want to say hi? Yes. Oh, that's not good. Well, go ahead and parallel park, and I am wrapping up, so I will be done soon. Up to you. I'll call you in like 10, 15 tops, okay? Okay. Bye. Okay. Bye. Okay. So, gotta rush. She's trapped and can't get back home. There's like a semi blocking our driveway. Lovely. Okay, so we've got it working. It's attaching to the player. We should see both events have been received. So that's the good news. So we can now delete those debug prints. And then what we're going to do next is the important stuff. Okay, so delete debug print here. And we've got this attaching. This will take up 4% capacity for 16 players. We should be fine in our world. They did give us a lot of simulation recently, so we should be fine. I'm just going to have to like pay attention to it and then reconsider going the local scripting method since it can save 3% to do it the hard way. But the hard way is really hard, and it's also intense on players' headsets. So like, it's actually better and more frame rate efficient to do it this way, but capacity meter wise, it's not. So it's just, that's how life is sometimes, isn't it? Okay. So with that said, I would say that eventually I did want to make attachable vests, and I could make it so that every vest comes with a text object like this. And so when you decide your vest, it comes with a heads up display built into it. Although now that I'm thinking about it, the vest attached to your torso, not your head. Problems. Okay, so one of our problems here is that this is centered so weirdly. And so I think that's part of the problem. I'm also thinking the rotation might be off. So let's zoom in and select, and then rotate 180 degrees. And then what we want to, oh, darn it. I hate when that happens. Try that again. And there we go. And so then what we want to do, zoom out, is maybe adjust this sound recorder until we get it positioned correctly. And so now that I'm in the, oh, did I hit play? I did hit play, okay. So I can't see it. I'm just like, I'm expecting to see it in front of me, but for some reason it isn't visible. Where are you? Oh, what are you doing over there? What you doing over there? Okay, I can't tell. I can't tell. This is where you really need a tester in here with you working on this stuff. This is just way, way too hard to do by yourself. I'm going to go into the More tab and actually do something completely different and switch this all back to 0. And I'll leave that one. I'll switch this back to 0. It wasn't moving to the spot that I thought it would, even though I was just working on this earlier, so I thought I had the numbers down right. Okay, I can't see it still. And pulling this out. Left. Okay. For some reason, it's way over there. This is likely due to that left alignment. So since it's to the left, we probably need to drag our thing to the right. The problem is the further off it is, the more it kind of jitters and shakes, which is not good for a heads-up display. So, let's see. We could turn the alignment off, but then the positioning won't be very good when we create a menu that's like a drop-down. So I would much rather get this right on the first time. I also want to print hello world so we can see if it is facing the correct direction. So I'm going to go add that to our text here. Hello world. And we don't have a scale set up correctly for that. So I'm going to go size equals 4. So this will be substantially bigger than our caret. Okay. And then let's see, the positioning, can we adjust it? Assuming it's jarting off to the left because of that, if we zoom in and then drag this way, zoom out, fingers crossed, that does the trick. I don't know. There we go. Can't see it still, so probably not in a good spot. Oh, it's definitely getting better. Let's, the text is backwards though, so I think I might have messed it up earlier. So we need to shoot it out that way. So, like I said, guess and check. Guess and check. Stop and zoom in. And then we want to rotate this 180 degrees. So another 180 back this way. And then I think we want to drag this that way. If I'm wrong, we'll go the other direction. Zoom out, script, and play. This is such a gross looking thing. Okay, I must have gone the wrong direction. So we should be able to see it behind us. Seemed to be in the wrong direction still. Something seemed very off about that. Like, something very seemed off about that. Okay, let's just try going this direction and see what that does. Okay, let go, zoom out, script, and play. Oh, okay, I can see it a hair in my peripheral vision. It's right there. So we need it to go that way. The text is backwards, is it? No, yeah, that's facing the right. Oh, I remember the last thing I really wanted to show you about this. Like, we're really close to getting a cool heads-up display, and then I'll try to live stream when we actually do player settings so you can kind of follow along, but more or less it's everything you saw at the beginning of this video just tied into this thing, plus some, like, maybe not using triggers and using some gestures, which is way harder than it should be. If you've ever been to Magic Mania by Sandwich, he does it in there, and that's the only reason I really want to try it is because I'm so impressed with that. The experience in there where you could draw, like, it was magical. I mean, it really was. Magic Mania was. So we need to shift this to the left, which means we need to move the thing to the right. Let's go ahead and try that. And then the thing that I want to show you is how to make this only visible to the player wearing it. So we need to shift it to the right. So I went the wrong direction. So we're going to just drag it to there. Zoom out, script, and play. Now you could also do this without moving the object, which is, oh, there we go. Okay, we're getting there. This is good. Okay, it bounces nice. It doesn't like jitter too much on my face. It's like I could read that without it being too crazy. I also want to be able to touch it. So this is definitely the right location. Although I'm realizing it is backwards, isn't it? For some reason, man, I thought I had that right. Okay, stop. Guess I didn't. Zoom in. Select these two things. Rotate 180 degrees. And undo. Try again. Just keeping a watchful eye on our time, guys. Sorry. I am running to an appointment at 30 after, so I do have to get out the door soon. Okay. When I rotated it, it did shift it in the wrong direction. And I think that's because I shouldn't have rotated this. That's what's going on here. So this should have gone right out this way. And play. Oh, shoot, zoom out. Zoom out. Whatever you do, zoom out. Okay, and then I jump in. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting into the right area. We just need to shift it down, move it a little bit closer, and then change the text size to be much smaller. So select, deselect, open up properties panel, zoom in, pull this in just a hair closer. We also wanted it to go further towards us. So I think this way, just a hair. I want to say that's the right answer. We'll find out in a minute. Now we're going to open up the properties for our text object and change the default size down to 1, not 21. 1, please. Thank you. And then we'll go ahead and notice that this is getting really small, so it's going to be harder to see. Zoom out. We also want to change the size of our hello world down to 2, because we're really trying to get this to fit correctly. Boom. And script, play, head into the world. Oh, okay, I can see it. It's over there. I went the wrong direction. So stop. Try again. Zoom in. And, or did I not go the wrong direction? Did the size of the text object change, changing the positioning? That could be it too. Script, play, zoom in. No. Stop, play, stop, play, stop. Okay, just trying some things to see. Zoom in. Zoom out, script, play. Okay, coming in. Ah, there we go. Okay, I need to go a little further that way and up, it appears. So stop. And finish this off, I'm going to just slide this over here, slide it just a hair this way, zoom out, go to the properties where I had adjusted the height, and I want to change the height back down to where it was at, so 0, and script, play. Yo, okay, that's pretty good. It's almost at touching distance, needs to come over a little bit more. But with this started, I just want to finish this off. Like, I need to do a little more adjustment, but it's pretty close, and I'm unfortunately out of time. But what we're going to do is we want that V, which is right up there in the top left. I'm not sure if you guys can actually see it. It would be kind of silly if I'm talking to you guys and you guys are like, I can't see it. Anyway, so it's right there. So I want to be able to touch the V. It looks like I can almost touch it, but I really want it to be right about here so I can easily tap it while I'm in the middle of a game. Then the drop down will come in. The text will be maybe a little bit smaller than this. You can then swipe left or swipe right and then swipe down to move to the next setting option. Yeah, gesture based, and then tap it again to turn it off. So that's the goal. We'll hopefully come back to that on a live stream. I'd love to show you guys how we're doing that. So maybe later today. Let's see. So the last thing I want to show you is how to turn off visibility so only the player wearing this can see it. And we've actually most of the way got it. All we have to do is on world start, we have to do something. So the first thing we do is go to our variables tab, create a list of players. These are the who can see. Can see HUD. Okay, so the can see HUD list, it's a list of players, is who can see the HUD. Now the reason it's a list is because you need to have a server player in there on world start. I should probably test this to confirm that this is correct, but this is how I believe it worked in the past, so I'm assuming it still works this way. So we add server player. I'm actually going to test because, you know, oh no, I can't test without another tester here. Darn. Maybe I can. Maybe I can. So we'll only do this when we want to. So we use a Boolean false so we don't do anything. And then what we want to do is add the player when they enter the world right here to the list. So we add a player to the list. And the other thing we want to do is set who can see when this happens. So under the Actions tab, you can set who can view object, set who is allowed to view object, to be the list of can see. So we set it to be self, so that's good. And then the other thing we want to do is duplicate this up into here. So the test we're doing is to see if an empty list, so the list is empty right now. We don't want anybody to be able to see this. So if I hit play world, can no one see it? Oh, look at that, no one can see it. Never mind, I guess we don't need to add a server player. With grabbable objects, I want to say that's how it works. So I guess we don't need this part. We just need to set who is allowed to view to be the empty list. And I guess we could even go a step further since this is only for a single player. We could just set it to server player here, and then down here, set it to player. So we get rid of the whole can see heads up display. But if you wanted multiple people to see it, that's how you do it. Use the list of players. Okay, so there we go. So we simplified that. And now when I enter the world, I'll be the only one who can see this text object. So I'll come in and I don't see it. Oh no, what did I do wrong? It's definitely there. Go into the world again. Oh, it worked the second time. Why did it work the second time and not the first time? Stop world, hit play, try this again. Coming into the world, 3, 2, and... Let's go back to using a list and see if it works better with the list. So we go undo, 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 and undo, undo, and then script, clear, and play. Okay, so we can't see it. We come into the world and we can see it. Okay, I guess use the list. I don't know why, but use the list. It worked. So that's how you do set visibility. Your camera will still see it, but no one else's camera will see it. They'll only be able to see their own. So, right, when I pull my camera out, I can see it, but no one else's camera will see it. So there you go. I think that's where we're going to wrap it for now, but you can see where we're heading. I definitely encourage you to check out the first hour of this if you just joined us. We did some really cool script breakdown of a player settings in Horizon Royale, and we are intending to come back to this potentially later today to finish up building a cool settings menu. All right, thank you guys so much for joining. I will see you in Horizon. I'll see you in Horizon Royale, and bye for now. Bye!